Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our new mini-series that we are presenting on the idea of living with Moshiach. So, ready for a couple of weeks on Sunday mornings, we have been studying about and learning about different topics that are related to the coming of Moshiach. And one of the ideas and the topics that actually came up during our class was the concept of the resurrection of the dead. So it is a traditional Jewish belief that after the coming of Mashiach and we go into a redemptive state, the dead, all of those that have passed for many thousands of years, are all going to come back alive. As amazing and incredible as that sounds, that people that have passed away for so long will come back alive, that is an important Jewish belief, as we're going to discover and discuss. So, as I mentioned, this had come up a couple of times, and people had asked a few questions as to how exactly it's going to work, what's going to happen, etc. So, after some work, I did some studying, and I prepared. We're going to do a 3-part mini-series on the resurrection of the dead. So, very excited to present it. And I do hope that everyone is going to gain a lot from this class. Today's class is sponsored by Jared and Stephanie Elad in honor of their children. If you would like to sponsor a class for next week or the week after or sometime in the future, please do let me know and we can arrange that. They tell a parable that some people asked a wise man once, what does he think about the world to come? What's his thoughts on what's going to happen in the future? What's going to be in the world to come? So the sage answered. He said, "Listen to me. How about one world at a time? You know, some people are one day at a time, and some people are one world at a time." So before we get into the specifics of the resurrection of the dead, let's talk for a couple of minutes of why is it that we're even talking about this? Why don't we just live in the here and the now? You know, we're here now. Whatever will happen later will happen later. Let's talk about the here and now. You know, it's always important to be present. So why the fixation? Why the obsession, if you will, with the future of the coming of Mashiach? So I have over here for you an interesting quote from the Rebbe. And perhaps this will give us some insight as to why we are sitting today and talking about something that's going to happen in the future. And the Rebbe said as follows. It's in the middle of a speech, so you can understand the context. And thus the question arises, says the Rebbe, since we've already completed our action and service throughout the duration of exile, we've done everything that we're supposed to. Jews have had self-sacrificed, they've given of themselves, etc., etc. So the question then becomes, what is the straightforward path, the easiest and fastest among all the paths of the Torah that all of the Jewish people who have completed their service should choose to accomplish their revelation and the coming of Mashiach? So what's the straightforward path, asks the Rebbe. What can we do right now to get to Mashiach? So the explanation of the straightforward path to reveal and bring Mashiach is through Malchus Shebetiferes. And that could be understood in practical terms. So let me just explain what we're saying. Right now, we are counting the Omer. So starting from Passover to Shavuot, there's 49 days of the Omer. And hopefully you are familiar with the idea that every day of the Omer represents another day of the 49 specific Sefirot. So you might be familiar with the concept of the 7 Sefirot, and each one of the 7 Sefirot is made up of all the other 7. So what's 7 times 7? 49. So for example, the first of the 7 Sefirot is called Chesed, kindness. The second one is called Gevura, which we're not going to get into what the Sefirot are, but you'll just have to take it as it is for right now. So every day you can have Chesed within Chesed, or you could have Gevura, judgment within Chesed, etc. So the particular day that the Rebbe was saying this talk, obviously 30 years ago, was the day that represented Malchus, which is the 7th Sephira, and Tiferes, which is the 3rd Sephira. And basically the Rebbe explains over here, which is the same day of the Omer that we counted yesterday. So as a preface, since our righteous Mashiach is ready to come immediately, but he hasn't actually come, therefore the final effort required of every Jew to bring Mashiach must be through this gateway called Malchus within Tiferet. What is that? So the idea of Mashiach, who's a king, right? Mashiach will be the anointed one. He will be the king. He'll be like the David, who will be, the king of our king. That's what Mashiach is. Mashiach is a person who's a king that will usher in the messianic redemption. And Tiferet is the concept of studying Torah. So Malchus Sheba Tiferet, Malchus within Tiferet, refers to learning of the Torah on the subjects of Mashiach. So in simple, if you didn't get all this references, the idea is that the Rebbe explained that the most straightforward path for us to bring Mashiach, to reach that state and that stage, is specifically through studying Torah about the coming of Mashiach. So it's not that we're sitting over here in exile and we are, just, refusing to admit to the current reality, or just fantasizing about something that's going to happen in the future, and not being realistic and practical. But on the contrary, because we're in exile, we are in what's called galut. We are awaiting the coming of Mashiach. We recognize that we've done so much, and Jews have, given of themselves throughout the generations constantly over and over again. So the Rebbe tells us that the most straightforward path towards the coming of Mashiach is specifically through studying the Torah related, the Torah meaning the subject of redemption and Mashiach, the way it is talked about inside the Torah, which shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, because that's how a Jew looks at the world in general. The Torah is how we create our reality. So whenever we want to change our reality, the Torah is the place to go. And when I say the Torah, I don't just mean like the Torah scroll and the 5 books of Moses. I'm talking about the Torah in its entirety, the written Torah, the oral Torah with all of its writings, etc., etc. Because we know that God looked inside the Torah and created the world. The Torah is the blueprint of the entire world. So through us studying specific parts of the Torah and emphasizing certain things in Torah, we have the ability to create and change our own reality. So that's important to keep in mind. And therefore we are here studying about the resurrection of the dead and the coming of Mashiach, because by doing that, we want to do what we can to bring about the coming of Mashiach. With that in mind, let's get into the topic for today, the resurrection of the dead. So as I mentioned earlier, it's an age-old tradition brought down in many different places that when Mashiach comes, after the arrival of Mashiach, rebuilds the temple, Jews go to Israel, the world is a wonderful place. The dead will literally climb out of their graves and come back alive. So it might sound a little like a horror movie or something, sounds a little, if you can, maybe zombies or something. But the truth is, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And what we're going to talk about before the how and the what, let's talk about where does this belief come from? Is it some obscure thing mentioned at the bottom of some random page of Talmud? Is it something that only Kabbalists believe? Where exactly does it come in? So the truth is that it's really one of the foundations of Jewish faith. What do I mean? So we all know of the Rambam, Maimonides, who lived like about 1,000 years ago. And the Rambam, who contributed tremendously to Torah, and when I say Torah, I mean the general genre of Torah. The Rambam, Maimonides, wrote books on Jewish law. He wrote books on Jewish philosophy. Really, is a huge influence in the different writings and the teachings of the Torah. One of the interesting things that the Rambam did was he created 13 principles of Jewish faith. He said, let's kind of create principles, pillars of faith. What are some of the principal ideas that Judaism believes? And he created 13 of them. Now, what's interesting to note about this idea that the Rambam, Maimonides, took, that he created 13 principles of Jewish faith, is that the Rambam, Maimonides' colleagues, were anti this idea. They said to the Rambam, it is incorrect what you are doing. Why? They said, how can you say that one belief in Judaism is more important than another? When you say there are 13 principles of Jewish faith, you're saying these 13 in a way are more important than the rest. However, we know that all 613 commandments of the Torah and every verse mentioned in the Torah, this is from Hashem, from God, this is divine. And a person that says, I believe in 99.9% of the Torah, but I don't believe in 1%, that's already a problem. We believe in everything. Everything comes from Hashem, from God. It's divine, the way it was revealed to him many times through the prophets or through the sages. So what kind of a business is this, they said, that you have 13 ideas that are principal ideas more important than the other? You know, from believing in God to keeping Shabbos and kosher. I mean, everything they said is equal. However, the Rambam disagreed with them. He said, no, everything is important, agreed. And a Jew believes in everything. But when we want to understand what it is that Jews believe in, what is the Jewish faith, we could definitely take 13 ideas and make them principles. And one of the ways that we know the Rambam is right or correct is because he stood the test of time, which, by the way, is a very important idea, that in Judaism, standing the test of time really becomes an important thing. If many Jews accept, a teaching or a person, that gives a tremendous amount of validity to them. So in the 13 principles of faith that the Rambam put together, the 13th one, number 13, the last one, is the belief in the resurrection of the dead. And hopefully throughout these 3 classes, we will come to understand why it is a principle of faith. Why is it so important to believe in the resurrection of the dead? That if I don't believe, I'm missing in a principle of faith. Because again, the Rambam is not listing a list of things that Jews believe in. That list would be much longer than 13. He's saying, what are the principles? What are the primary things that a Jew believes in? So on par with this belief in the resurrection of the dead is the primacy of the prophecy of Moses, for example, a belief in one God, a belief in the coming of Mashiach. Those kinds of things are mentioned in the 13 principles of faith. So number 13 says the Rambam is the belief in the resurrection of the dead. Now, you might be familiar that in many prayer books, they took these 13 principles of faith from the Rambam and they put it into a prayer that starts with the words Ani Ma'amin. Ani Ma'amin means I believe. So every morning they say Ani Ma'amin, I believe in this, I believe in this, I believe in this, and you announce it that you believe in 1 and 2 and 3 all the way through 13. So the way it's written in the prayer book, I quoted for you here on the page. It says, I believe with perfect faith that the dead will be brought back to life when God wills it to happen. So again, it's the same idea. It's just the way it's reworded for the purpose of a prayer. So that's the starting point. The starting point is the Rambam, who declares this belief in the resurrection of the dead as one of the 13 principles of faith. Because that tells us that it's not just a side issue, but that tells us how important it is. All right, and then I have over here in the bottom, it says in his discourse on the resurrection, the Rambam writes that the concept of resurrection, which is well known among our people and accepted throughout all its circles, and which is often mentioned in the prayers and in the Aggadic teachings and supplications written by the prophets and the former sages, with which the Talmud and the Midrashim are replete, signifies the following: the soul will return to the body after they have been separated by death. No Jew has disputed this concept, and it cannot be interpreted other than literally. One may not accept the view of any Jew who believes otherwise. Pretty intense from the Rambam. Does anybody want to pipe in over here with a question or a comment?
what is the definition of death there? Because in some writings, you're dead if you're sinful.
In this case, dead means when the soul leaves the body and they're buried 6 feet under. I mean, it's clear from the context that the resurrection of the dead. Carolyn, what were you going to ask?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the pictures now, so they put them for auction instead of going to you. You're assholes.
All right, I'm with you.
I was raised Reform Judaism, and they explain this concept as being not literal bodies, but that we bring everyone back to life through memories, and souls may come back, but the bodies aren't going to.
Right. So that could be similar to what Dr. Schultz was saying, if it's a metaphoric idea.
So are you saying, Rabbi saying that that's unacceptable? So the Reform.
Well, you have to remember the Rambam lived a long time before the Reform movement started. So
yes.
It's his way of being very firm that this is a an important belief. We're not here to dispute or to put down another person's belief or their understanding. The Torah has always been open to interpretation and to many different. We're going to present it kind of in the historical perspective of how it was always viewed. But to your point, it seems very clear that the Rambam is adamant that it's a literal. Dr. Schultz was saying the same thing. He said, what's death? Maybe death means people that are, sinning, that are not connected to, and then bringing them back to life means having them do repentance. So perhaps it's kind of a similar idea. So one of the things. No, I understand that they were just you.
I was just curious. There's a past learning, so I don't necessarily.
Right. Obviously, the Rambam wouldn't, in general, would have a different approach to those that you're quoting. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that he's kind of. But the Rambam is adamant that this is a principle of faith, and one of the things that the Rambam said was that the Torah, as in the Talmud, is filled with this idea being discussed. So I don't have them on the slide, but I want to just read for you a couple of them. First of all, from the book of Daniel, we have over there a famous verse that he prophesies that says, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awaken, some to everlasting life and some to approach an everlasting contempt. So we see there's a verse clearly in the book of Daniel, which talk about this idea. And then when you go to the Talmud is filled. I said, there's probably at least 20, if not more, discussions about this. I'll just give you some. The famous Rebbe Lazar HaKapar used to say, those who are born are destined to die, those who are dead are destined to live again. The Mishnah from the Tractate of Sanhedrin says, all of Israel have a share in the world to come. And the Gemara says, what does it mean, a share in the world to come? The world to come is the resurrection of the dead, because the Mishnah says everyone has a share in the world to come, except for the people that deny that there will be a resurrection of the dead. So what's the connection? Why does it say all those have a share in the world to come, except for those who deny the world of the idea of resurrection? So the Gemara says, because the world to come means the resurrection. So every Jew all of Israel has a portion in the resurrection of the dead, except for the person that denies that. Then how can they be resurrected if they themselves don't believe in it? Many conversations in the Talmud that says, where in the actual Bible, where in the Torah, right, where in the 5 books of Moses, where in the Chumash do we see this concept of a resurrection of the dead? So one of those is the following. It says, I have established my covenant with them, referring to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them the land of Canaan. So the Gemara says, why does it say, the Talmud says, why does it say that God will give the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, to them, to the patriarchs? Never happened, right? Only after the days of Moses did the Jewish people inherit the land properly. So the Torah should have said, I'll give their descendants. So from here, says the Gemara, we see that the forefathers will be resurrected, and they themselves literally will have a portion in the land to come. Many times in the Talmud, we find different evil people or different non-believers questioning this idea, and answered by many of the different sages. I'll just read you one more. Famous one says that the famous Rabbi Meir said, from where do we learn about the resurrection of the dead in the Torah? Which verse in the Torah, in the Chumash, in the actual Torah itself, alludes to the fact that there will be a resurrection of the dead? So he says from the verse that says, Az Yashir Moshe. So you might be familiar with the fact that when the Jewish people crossed the sea, after the Jewish people crossed the sea, it says that Moses and the Jewish people sang a song. So famous is this passage from the Torah that we say it every single day in our morning prayers. It's called Az Yashir Moshe. But in Hebrew, the words Az Yashir Moshe means then Moses will sing. Because the word Yashir is a future tense. In Hebrew, the word can have the same word, and you just change the tense. So Az Yashir Moshe means, and then Moses will sing. So what do you mean, and then Moses will sing? It was talking about the present. So from there says Rabbi Meir that there will be a resurrection of the dead in the future, and Moses will rise again and sing a song as well. The Talmud says there are three keys that God never entrusts to an agent: the keys to birth, reign, and the resurrection. It's an interesting idea that's discussed at great length, that never does God give away the keys to these three things: birth, reign, and the resurrection. So here you see just many different examples from the Mishnah that clearly states all of Israel will have a portion in the world to come, and the Gemara clearly says that the world to come is talking about the resurrection of the dead. Numerous times in the Torah, different sages saying, from where in the Torah do we see this concept of the resurrection of the dead? And so many places in the Torah where there's this reference to the future, whether it be Moses in the future singing, the patriarchs inheriting the land one day, whether it be these three keys which are not given away, etc. So the Talmud is filled, like I said, at least 25 examples of different ideas where this idea is shared in the Torah, how the resurrection of the dead is mentioned in the Torah and discussed at great length. So where that leaves us is we have the Rambam telling us that it's a principle of faith, and so many places in the Talmud and in the oral tradition with references as to where this comes from in the Torah. Sounds like a plan? All right. So on a simple level, and at least one way of understanding it, we'll just word it like that, is that, human beings die, it's part of life. We pass away, and after a person passes away, we do believe that the soul lives forever. Of course, soul always existed. Before you were born, your soul also always existed. Your soul is from Hashem. And after a person passes away, his soul continues to exist as well. That's what we call Gan Eden, right? The Garden of Eden, or Gehenna, loosely translated as hell. There's a judgment that the soul goes through, and all of the souls that have passed are still in existence, and they're in heaven, right? They are basking in the glory of Hashem. They're studying Torah, whatever souls do after they pass away. Please God, none of us will find out for a very long time. So we're not going to get into the conversation today about what does, Judaism believe about heaven and hell, etc. But what I'm just trying to differentiate between, there is, I can't call it a place, but there is, for lack of a better word, the place where the souls hang out after they pass away, and happening right now, right? All of the souls of those that have departed, or the souls of those that are going to still be born, they exist. They are sitting under Hashem's chair, so to say, and basking in Hashem's glory. But when we talk about the resurrection of the dead, what we're actually saying is that all of those that have passed and have been, in the spiritual worlds for thousands of years, their souls are going to once again descend, come back into their very own body, and live a physical life like you and me are living right now. Which, if you think about it, is a crazy, amazing thing. Because take, for example, the soul of Moshe, Moses, our teacher. Moses lived, 3,000 years ago. And we're told that a soul, even when it's not in a body, is continuously climbing higher and higher, which means it's continuously getting to a deeper understanding of Hashem's Shekhinah, of God's presence. So take, for example, Moses, the greatest Torah teacher of all times. Imagine how high, if you will, how in the spiritual world his soul is, especially that it's been there for so long. His soul is continuously going higher and higher and higher, right? We're told that the righteous don't never have any rest because they're continuously going higher. Higher means to a deeper understanding of Hashem's light, to a deeper understanding of Hashem's light. So he's been there for so many years, every day getting higher and higher and higher. And nevertheless, we're saying that when Mashiach comes and the time for the resurrection of the dead is going to happen, that soul is going to be pulled out from the highest, greatest of the greatest place, and pulled down back and placed into a body and come back down into this world, which really needs some understanding. Why? What can we possibly do in this world with the limitations of a body that the soul cannot have and cannot experience in heaven the way it is right now? If anything, the soul can accomplish and can achieve and can feel so much more in heaven than it can in a body. A body desensitizes the soul. Our ability to understand God's light and to attach ourselves to Hashem is so limited, because you sit down to study and your stomach rumbles, you're hungry, you're tired, you can barely study right a passage of the Torah. A soul doesn't have that problem. It can bask in the glory of Hashem. It can study the Torah on the deepest level, and that's what souls do. So what benefit can there possibly be to, what schlep means? To schlepping the great souls, or even all the souls from the world of souls, and putting them back in the body down here in this world. So that's the question that we want to address, or want you to keep in mind. Why a bodily resurrection? Why can't we all just hang out, soul without a body? So in order to better understand that, I want to introduce you to a very interesting and famous machloket. Machloket means an argument. And this argument is between the Rambam, Maimonides, who we quoted earlier, and he argues with the Ramban, Nachmanides, and many others who don't see eye to eye with him in this regard. And the question is as follows. What happens at the end of time? Meaning, Moshiach comes, we build a Beit HaMikdash, we build a temple, and then there's the resurrection of the dead, so all the souls come back into bodies, and stuff's going on. But what happens then just for the rest of eternity? What's the end goal? 1,000 years after the resurrection of the dead, 2,000 years after the resurrection of the dead, what happens then? Do we just live forever? I mean, like what happens? So the Rambam actually said that when we talk about the world to come, it's really the end result is a world of souls. So the Rambam, Maimonides, of course, agrees that there'll be a resurrection of the dead. All the souls that are now in the world of souls will come back down into the body, and they'll live for a certain amount of time in a body. But eventually, after a certain amount of time, the souls will leave the bodies again. All souls will leave bodies. Bodies will perish. And, for eternity, we shall exist as souls, you know, however, wherever souls hang out and chill. You got that? So when you think about in 1 billion years time, 1 million years time, whatever it is, the Rambam Maimonides says, you know, we're souls without bodies for the rest of eternity. The Ramban, Nachmanides, and others say no. When we talk about the world to come, that's talking about the resurrection of the dead, and we will actually exist souls in bodies forever. So we'll come back to life. Death will be removed from the world, and every one of us, me and Carolyn sitting in this room, and all of you on Zoom, are going to have, we're going to live forever, body and soul. No disease, no sickness. You won't age. You'll be as good looking as you are now. Don't worry about that. And you'll just live forever, body and soul, right? That's what you see on the screen. The other authorities maintain that after death, all souls abide in the world of souls until the resurrection. So you die, your soul goes up to the world of souls, but then when it's time for resurrection, we all come back down, at which time they are finally enclosed in a body, and in that state are granted their ultimate reward, and that way we stay in that state forever. What's interesting is that when it comes to this argument between the Rambam and the Ramban, the Arizal weighed in. So a little bit of historical context. The Rambam, Maimonides and Nachmanides, like 1,000 years ago. The Arizal, more like 500 years ago. And the Arizal was a famous Kabbalist. So you might see in the little notes over there, it says, the Arizal, whose pronouncement in the esoteric areas of the Torah have been universally accepted, he kind of became the universally accepted authority when it came to the mystical and the esoteric teachings of the Torah. He ruled according to the majority option. He said that that's actually the way it's going to be. So if you want to know what's going to be for the rest of eternity, for the rest of the time, are we going to be soul without a body or soul with a body? The answer is we're going with Nachmanides, opinion number 2, the majority, that we will be body in soul for the rest of eternity. Which really strengthens my question that I asked you before. Why is that? What is there to gain of being in a soul in a body for the rest of eternity that we cannot experience if we are just a soul? And that's what we're going to kind of break down now. Before they do that, I want to just check in with all of you and make sure that everyone has clarity as to what we're saying. And if you want to share a question or a statement or something. Does anybody want to share something?
Yeah, I have a question, Rabbi. Can you
Yeah,
hear
but
me?
you have to talk a little louder.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let's say all these billions and billions of people will get resurrected someday, and their souls will come back to their bodies. And I'm having trouble understanding how all these resurrected people will fit on this limited planet of ours, or they go to another planet.
Great question. So the question is, how can billions of people all coexist on this limited planet of ours? So good question. I'm not going to get too much into the answer right now because there is some limitation as to who exactly will be resurrected, which we're going to talk about a little bit probably next week or the week after. So when we have that conversation, perhaps we'll talk about this as well, as to how will there be space for all of us. The first thing you have to know is that you're going to have to share your house. Is that okay?
Right. Even if we share houses,
One other family.
there's still not enough space. There's still not enough space for billions and billions of people. We're talking about, I don't know, trillions of people who died, you know, and if they get resurrected, where is the space for them?
Your question is interesting, but why we have so many planets around the Earth? What are they good for? Right now, for nothing, right? They are all empty. Nobody can inhabit those planets. Why did God create them?
That's another great question.
It's very, very important question.
So the
So
good
maybe
thing
next
is
time.
that if everyone gets resurrected, or I should say when everyone gets resurrected and they can't find space, we'll tell them that we already had a board meeting about this. Chabad of Frisco had a class, and it was decided that all the people that get resurrected have to go live on a different planet. Or we'll make some sort of a test. It will be like an obstacle course. And if they can prove themselves to be very agile and very, then we'll let them stay on this planet. Otherwise, we'll ship them off. We'll send them to Elon Musk and get I heard he's building in the Rio Grande Valley some sort of something. They'll be shipped there. They'll get on some sort of a capsule, and we'll send them off. But on a serious note, it's a good question. How can there be space for so many? So the first clarification is there is some limitation as to who is resurrected. And also you have to understand that the world then operates in a completely different way, because now the world is operating with a mixture of good and bad. So the world is producing evil, and that affects farming, that affects, so much different kinds of things. So when a world is completely different with no evil and no bad as well, the earth can fit a lot more, than we have right now. And I'm not just talking about double and triple, even on a scientific level, so many, there's no hospital, and there won't be any hospitals. I mean, there's so many things that will be cut out and do it slightly differently. So you have to understand that it's not going to be the world the way we're operating now, and each person taking up as much space as we're taking up now. It's going to be a completely different kind of world. So good question, and two things to keep in mind, and we'll get a little bit more into it. The first thing to keep in mind is that A, there is some limitations as to who gets resurrected, and B, the second thing to keep in mind is that the world is going to be operating completely different than it operates now. Okay, so keep those two things in mind, and let's get through a couple more interesting things. So right now we're holding by the question of why the resurrection? Why a bodily resurrection? I mean, we can accomplish so much more, or we can be so much more if we're a soul without a body. So one answer is that the physical body deserves reward for all the mitzvot, for all the good things that we did, right? Your body, it came to shul, your body gave charity, ate kosher, put on tefillin, all the mitzvahs, all the good deeds that we did with our physical body, the physical body deserves a reward. Now, in the world of souls, where our ancestors are, the body is not receiving any reward, because the body unfortunately is in the ground rotting, and the soul is receiving its reward for the good work that it did by being in the world of souls and basking in God's glory. But how does the body get a reward? Because the mitzvot, the good things that we do, is really a combination between body and soul. And you have a beautiful analogy from the Talmud that I wrote over here, just because I find it so Talmud-like. This is like such a classic analogy from the Talmud. The Talmud says as follows: a blind man and a lame man both desired to raid a certain orchard. And they wanted to do the olden day bank heist, but they couldn't, because one man was blind, he couldn't see, and the other one was lame, he couldn't walk. So the lame man, right, the crippled man, climbed up on the shoulders of the blind man, and he directed him, and after some practice, they figured it out. They raided the orchard, they stole the fruit, and on their way out, running, the owner caught them separately on their way out, and each one protested that he could not have stolen alone, right? The lame man says, how could I have stolen from your orchard? I can't even walk. And the blind man says, what do you mean me? I couldn't have done that. I'm blind, I can't see. So the resourceful owner thereupon sat the lame man on the shoulders of the blind man, and he administered their punishment together. So the idea is that, a body, what could a body do on its own? Nothing. The body on its own wouldn't even be alive. It needs a soul to give it life. A soul on its own can't do anything because a soul doesn't have hands and feet to be able to go to shul and put on tefillin and eat kosher and do all of these things. So the life that we live and doing the mitzvahs that we do is a combination between body and soul. You know, you take the blind and you put it take the lame and you put it on the blind. You take the soul, you insert it inside a body. Now you have a living, breathing human being capable of being tempted and overcoming temptation, capable of, displaying its loyalty to Hashem by doing the mitzvot, etc. And therefore, both deserve to be rewarded. So the world of souls, the coming world where the souls are, that's the soul getting its reward. But when does the body get its reward? So to that, the answer is the body gets its reward in the time of the resurrection. When we're resurrected and the soul comes back into the body, then your body will receive its reward because the body will be refined to a much greater degree. God will remove evil from this world. And we will live in a world which is good. We won't have to struggle for livelihood. We won't have to struggle for health, etc. We can at that point enjoy the truly enjoyable things, which when I say that, I don't mean eating steaks and sitting in hot tubs or whatever else you consider to be good, but I'm referring to, having a open and obvious connection to Hashem. So the resurrection of the dead is a time when the body will be rewarded for its work. That's the first answer to the question, why a bodily resurrection? Why can't we just be souls forever? The answer is because we have to have a time where the body can be rewarded for its participation and its work in serving Hashem, in its divine service, in doing the mitzvot, etc., etc. And that reward will come when we are resurrected and the world is a perfect place. We don't have to deal with corona, we don't have to deal with livelihood, we don't have to deal with health crises, etc., etc. Everything is just good, and we live a beautiful, healthy life, etc., etc. That's answer number one. Yes.
Do we come back to our bodies as the age that we passed, or younger bodies?
Great question. The question is, just to repeat it for those of you who are on Zoom, will we come back to our bodies as the same age as when we left them? What condition will they be in, etc. So I'm going to use this question as a teaser for next week. If you come back next week, I'll tell you the answer to that question. But if you don't come back, you're never going to know. So make sure you come back next week. But now on a serious note, we'll talk about when the body is resurrected, when will it come back? And another interesting conversation we'll have next week, by the way, just to throw in an extra teaser to make sure you come back next week, is that Jews believe in reincarnation. You know that, right? That means that your soul is not the first time you've been here before. You've been around before. So if my soul has been here a couple times before, so which body is my soul going to come back into? If I was here, 500 years ago in some different dude's body, right? So then who's the soul going to come back into? So we're going to talk about that next week as well, because we believe in reincarnation. And none of our souls, by the way, are new souls. The concept of a new soul is extremely, extremely rare. So we've all been here once before. So when the soul gets resurrected, whose body is it coming back into? And we'll talk about that. But let's get back to our previous conversation because I want to give one more answer, which is kind of really the kicker of this whole thing. So again, the question is, why a bodily resurrection? Why is the end goal of everything, especially according to the Arizal, that the end of everything is that souls come back into bodies and there they remain forever? Why is that the end of everything? So really it goes back to something that we've discussed many times, and that is, what's the purpose for creation? You might be asking yourself, I don't see the connection between the two, but you'll understand in a minute. The purpose of creation, when I say that, is that there was a time where the world didn't exist. Jews who believe in creation believe that God created the world deliberately at a certain point. There was a time where the world didn't exist. Perhaps the wrong word is time, but just for lack of a better word, there was at some point that the world didn't exist, and God said, I'm creating this world, and he did it for a reason. God didn't do things by accident. So quoted in the Tanya is a Medrash Tanchuma, which says as follows: the purpose for which this world was created is that the Holy One, blessed be he, desired to have an abode in the lower worlds. An abode means a home. So God created this world in order that he should have a home in the lower worlds. what in the world does that mean? What do we mean when we say lower world versus higher world? What we mean is as follows. When God created the world, he created multiple current realities. We're calling them worlds. In each one of these worlds, there's a different amount of God's presence revealed. In fact, it's actually like if you can imagine, like a downward funnel or downward ladder. So in the highest world, in the highest reality, God's presence is very much felt and very much obvious, to the point that if you, so to say, visited that world or visited that reality, you would not feel your own presence. That led into the next world, which in the next world, God's presence is a little bit less felt, thereby an other, whether it be an angel, a soul, a human, something else, so to say, that's independent of God, so to say, can start feeling its own existence. So if you would go to that world, you would feel like, hey, I exist, but you would feel completely dependent on God. And then eventually, after thousands and thousands of these different realities, we get to our world, which is called the lowest world. Why are we the lowest world? Because in our world, we feel independent of Hashem, and we don't feel God's presence at all unless we literally look for it and search for it. So hidden is God from our world that one man called, I forgot his first name, something Darwin, got up and decided that there was no God. That's how hidden God is, that people can even deny Hashem. You understand? If you lived in the world of the angels, you couldn't wake up one morning and say, well, God doesn't exist, because every angel literally feels God's presence pulsing through his spiritual veins. Our world is called the lowest world because we live in a world where God hid himself deliberately. In fact, when God created the world, God said, I need a world, I want a world where I will be completely hidden, and there will be existences and creations that will go and search for me and find me. In order to get to that world, which is where we live, God then put into place all these other worlds. All the other worlds, all the other realities only exist in order to get to our world. I'll give you an example. Imagine you had a room that you wanted to completely block the sunlight out of. So the way you would do it is you would build a room within a room, 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 etc., etc. And on the outside, you would block the windows, but in the outside room, there's still going to be some light coming through. And then in room number 2, there'll be even less light coming through. In room number 3, there'll be even less light coming through. In room number 4, there'll be even less, and the light will get less and less and less and less and less till you get to the center where there'll be barely any light, just enough light that you don't, smash into someone else. So it's the same thing that God did. He created, one world or one reality where his presence was obvious and felt and overwhelming. And then that led to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. But the purpose of everything is our world. Could you imagine that? We are the purpose of God's creation. All the angels only exist because of you and me. God wanted that there should be a world, a place where his presence is unfelt, unknown, and we should make a home for him. What's a home? A home is the place where you feel at home, right? When you come to my house, you cannot walk around in your boxers because it's my house, it's not yours, right? But in your house, you could walk around in your boxers because it's your house. And that's where you feel at home, assuming that the people that live in your house don't mind, which I'm not going to get involved in your personal life, right? But the point is that a home is where you can be comfortable and you can express yourself. So God wanted a world where he's unseen, unfelt, and that human beings should make him be felt and seen in this world, which we do by fulfilling the Torah and the mitzvot, etc., etc. Everyone with me? So in case you are wondering, what is the purpose of creation? The purpose why God created this world is that why he made any world is that there should be a world in which he was hidden. That's what we call the lower worlds, lower because they don't express Hashem. And we, the human beings, should go out and search for Hashem and uncover Hashem and make Hashem seen and felt in this world. And that is what we're working towards. Throughout history, that is what we are doing. We are working to uncover and make a home for Hashem. And, you know, there's a ladder, so to say, of bringing the world to this perfection and gradually becoming more refined. There's the present era that we're dealing with still. The world is preoccupied with a constant battle between the forces of good and evil. Right now, there's good. Good means it represents God. It reveals Hashem. And there's evil. Evil means that it covers Hashem. It's the opposite of Hashem. And right now, we are dealing with that constant battle between these two forces. Then there's going to be stage number 2, which is the Messianic era. When Mashiach comes, we will have won this battle. Redemption will replace exile. We are going to return to the level of perfection that Adam, the first human, was holding before he did the sin of the tree of knowledge. And all forms of evil, although they will exist, they will be separated from us. And the world will be a perfect place to reveal God's presence and God's goodness. And then comes a third stage, which is the resurrection of the dead. And at that point, the evil will be utterly eradicated. The world, there'll be no more death, there'll be no more sickness, etc. So in terms of the world reaching its perfection and reaching its, the reason for what it was created, the resurrection of the dead is that time. So now let's think about this for a minute. The question was, why is the end result a bodily resurrection, a resurrection where the soul will come back into the body? And the answer is because, why did God create the world? God created a world that you should have a body which makes you feel separated from Hashem, that very body, because your body is part of the physical world, that very body or that very mind, which understands and contemplates physical realities, physical things, doesn't necessarily agree or understand how God is the only thing that exists. That body and that mind, this physical world, should eventually come to the point where God is at home over here. What does it mean, God to be at home? God being at home means that the world itself will say nothing else exists besides for Hashem. So God's plan from the beginning was that you should have a physical world made up of walls and cars. But when you look at the wall, you'll see everything in this world understands and recognizes that they are only a manifestation. They are only a part of God's existence. So why a bodily resurrection? The answer to that question is because that was the plan the whole entire time. The point was that God's presence should be felt in a world that he had originally not been seen, this physical world. This physical world was the purpose of creation from the beginning. So what's the end result? The end result is that thing being, reaching that goal. When we reach that goal, the physical world, which up until now, was not displaying Hashem, will eventually display Hashem, and everywhere we look, we're going to see God's presence. To the point that the Midrash says that when, in the times of the resurrection, if you're going to reach out to eat something which is not going to be permitted, the food itself will cry out, "Don't eat me." Now, that doesn't mean literally that the food will, get a little mouth and start talking to you. But the reality of the world is going to be so in sync with God's desires, it's going to be impossible to sin. The world will be a perfect conduit for revealing Hashem. Because remember, that was the plan from the beginning. So right now, the world is the opposite. Everything that we experience, we need to battle, we need to fight. How can I see Hashem in this experience, right? People are always asking, why does God do this? Why does God do that? And of course we're asking that because everything that happens, so many things that happen seem to be in contradiction to Hashem. If God is in charge, well, why is that guy running the show, right? Now we're in exile. But when Mashiach comes, the physical world will be in perfect sync and harmony with Hashem's desires, with Hashem's revelation, and we'll be able to see how the world is literally a part of Hashem. And that's why the end result is specifically resurrection as soul in a physical body, because that was the plan to begin with. I want to just finish with sharing the same idea, but from a different angle. Before I do that, does anybody want to ask a question, especially if it's a question that's seeking clarification?
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
On the last slide, number 2, who wrote that? Where it said Adam needed to get back to perfection? Could you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm just thinking if I should say I wrote it or for somebody else, if I should tell you somebody else wrote it.
Well, the reason I say is that, I don't see a reason why the sentence did not include Eve, where it says before the sin of Adam and Eve. So I don't know why they did not include.
Oh, I see. I don't think it
The
means
woman.
specifically Adam. I think it just means, Adam as he represents mankind.
Okay,
Really,
thanks.
Adam includes Adam and Eve, right? They were really one and the same person.
Or it was Adam Kedman.
Which probably also includes Eve. So to answer your question, I believe we're not speaking specifically about Adam. We're speaking about the fact that human beings, Adam and Eve, existed before the sin. And at that point, before they sinned, there was evil in the world, but good and evil were separate, right? They lived in the Garden of Eden. They lived an amazing life. And then after their sin, they were both banished from the garden and began the life the way we know it now. All right, any other questions? Just because I'm going to come to the same idea that we shared, just from a little bit of a different angle. So let me share it with you, and then we'll take more questions or comments, because this is really going to be the last. This slide over here is the last slide. And it goes like this: when it all began, heaven was here on earth. This physical earthly world, more than any of the higher spiritual worlds, was the place where the very essence of God's infinite light could be found. But humankind, step by step, banished the divine presence from its home with the tree of knowledge, the man who murdered his brother, with all those things that human beings do, etc. Since humankind chased it away, only humankind can bring it back. And this began with Abraham, who proclaimed the oneness for all the world. And it ends with us. Our generation will bring heaven back down to earth. So what do I want to say? What I want to say is as follows, is that this physical world was the place where the very essence of God's infinite light could be found. What do I mean? So God can express himself in many, many different ways, right? And usually, or I should say always, whenever you are experiencing a revelation of Hashem, you are not experiencing his very essence, because you are only experiencing one element of him. Make sense? Right? If you attend a lecture from a big professor and you listen to his talk on some topic, you are experiencing him, but you're only experiencing him on an intellectual level. You're not experiencing his emotions. If you go to a concert and you listen to music from someone, you are experiencing, you are engulfed by their energy, but it's almost impossible to experience the essence of a person, right? How do I give over my essence? So when it comes to Hashem, it's the same thing. You can study Torah and do a mitzvah, and you can connect to Hashem. You can, experience some of God's infinite light. But how do you experience God's very essence? So God's essence means who he is, deeper than any way that he can express himself. Because if God chooses to express himself, or God expresses himself in this or that, you're not getting his essence. Essence means the deepest, very, who he is, the way he is for himself. So here's an interesting thing for you, and listen very carefully. The only place and the only reality where one can experience God's essence is in this world, in this physical world, body and soul. What we can experience in this world body and soul, is greater than any soul without a body can experience. For two reasons, which are really the one and the same. Number one, because this was the purpose of why God created all the worlds. So ultimately over here is where you're going to get this is where God is going to express himself in the most open and obvious way, where he's going to be most comfortable, because this is what he wanted to begin with. All the other places were just stepping and places, I'm saying, not literally places, but all the other expressions of God were all stepping stones to get somewhere, right? Even when God revealed himself to a prophet, that wasn't God's essence being revealed. No prophet can handle God's essence, even Moses, right? Because that was during periods of history where we had not yet reached the perfection of the world for which God created the world. But when we reach the finish line, now God says, we made it. Here I am in my entirety. And the second element, and this is a little bit deep, but I want you to listen very carefully because it's an amazing idea, is God's infinite essence is greater than anything finite and then greater than anything infinite. And the only way it can be expressed is through the expression of two opposites at the same time. Does that make any sense? In other words, if God expresses himself with an infinite light, and you somehow had a vision, you had a prophecy, and you experienced God in his infinite ability, you're only experiencing one element of God, because God also has the capacity for being finite, for being limited, right? God, just like God is the strongest giver, he's also the strongest at holding something back. If God can give something in the strongest way, he can hold himself back in the most amazing way. So think about this for a minute. If you experience a world where God is completely hidden, in a way, you are experiencing God that in the most profound way, because you are experiencing God's ability to hide himself. And God's ability to hide himself is the strongest that anyone has to hide themselves. Only God can make a world from which he is completely hidden. No one else can do that. How can you make something and hide yourself from it? You can't. Because you are automatically imprinted in this thing. You made it. Only God can make something and hide himself completely. So again, God has the strongest, because he's infinite, ability to express himself, and God has the strongest ability to hide himself. Both of those, he's the master of those, giving and hiding, expressing and being hidden. This world, body and soul, embodies those two things at the very same time. On one hand, you'll be a body, you'll live in a physical reality. The physical reality is God's expression of how he hides himself. And at the same time, it will be a soul, there'll be a spiritual revelation, which is God expressing himself. So when Mashiach comes, we're going to be body and soul. Why? Because toggling these two opposites at the same time is the only way that you can enjoy and experience God's essence. Because on one hand, you're experiencing God's ability to give. You're going to have the greatest divine revelation. At the same time, it's going to be a physical world, which in its core hides Hashem. So you're also experiencing God's divine ability, which is infinite ability to hide himself. So in conclusion, we began by explaining that the idea of the resurrection of the dead is one of the 13 principles of faith from the Rambam. It's spoken about so many different places throughout the Mishnah and the Talmud, etc. And in many places of those Mishnah and the Talmud, it quotes where in the Torah, which verses is teaching us the idea of the resurrection of the dead. So, in simple, after a person passes away, his soul goes up to the world of souls. But then when it comes time for the resurrection, his soul comes back down. We said there's an argument between the Rambam, Maimonides, and many other commentaries as to what's the end result. What do we do forever? The Rambam says we'll eventually revert back just to souls, or the other opinions, and the Arizal rules like that other opinion says we will be body and soul for all eternity. And then the question is, why? Why should we be body and soul for all eternity? So A, we explained that it's a reward for the body for the mitzvahs. B, we explained that the purpose of creation was to have this world and this world be a place which expresses God's infinite light. And that's going to happen when when Mashiach went with the resurrection of the dead. And the last thing I explained to you is that when you have body and soul, you have physical and spiritual being at the same time, this is expressing God's infinite ability of expression and God's ability to hold himself back. And when the two of those come together, you're experiencing opposites at the very same time, which is expressing God's infinite ability.